The Channel 4 show Married at First Sight UK has been in the headlines this week due to the decision to include a transgender contestant for the first time ever. The premise of the show is that couples get married after meeting their partner for the first time ever at the altar. And controversy has already erupted over claims the show pretended the man who married the transgender contestant was only told this fact afterwards, when in fact he had been informed beforehand. Perhaps more importantly is this kind of stunt making something of a mockery of marriage. Which brings me to this week's duel. Joining me tonight to discuss this, director of the Common Sense Society, Emma Webb, and author of best-selling book Free Your Mind, Laura Dodsworth. Laura, what does marriage mean?
It should mean a lifelong commitment. It's incredibly serious. It brings joy to the individuals who are married, to families. It brings stability to society. Marriage is the bedrock of a good society. I don't care if I sound old-fashioned, and you know what, I'm actually also divorced, which was a great sadness. I'm engaged to be married again. And some people said, oh, why do you want to get married again? Well, I believe in marriage. Yeah. I think it's really important. So there's something about this whole series which doesn't sit right with me anyway. And I think that a sadness about it is that the reality TV producers and the broadcasters do not care what they do in order to get the ratings and to get the sponsors and to get the advertisers. Yeah. Now, do you know, a number of reality TV stars have sadly committed suicide in recent years. I mean, it's in the tens. It's in the tens. Now, when you go onto a reality TV show, you're supposed to be screened by psychologists and taken care of. And you'll see yesterday, the psychologists on Married at First Sight came out and said, no, hang on, the guy wasn't being duped. He knew that his bride is transgender.
So there was a lie there.
But what kind of psychologists, worth their salt, put a man and a transgender, a trans woman into that situation? I mean, if the man rejects her, everyone will say he's a transphobe. And the trans woman is going to get a mixture of support and backlash. You know, they're going to be very vulnerable. And I think that the whole premise of the show in that sense is profoundly unethical, as well as undermining what marriage is all about.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of the show until you... Thank you for raising the topic, by the way. Until you brought this to my attention. I think reality TV is the lowest common denominator rubbish that we get hooked on, and it's rotting our brains. You know, grandmas used to say, don't watch television, it rots your brain. This is the exact kind of thing that we're talking about. Emma, what does marriage mean to you?
Well, I've always thought this show is awful for the very reason that the underlying assumption is that marriage is to be taken so lightly that if this match isn't really quite right, they can always just get divorced afterwards. I also agree with Laura. I think that marriage is a lifelong commitment. I take the biblical view that when you get married, you become of one flesh. I think that marriage is a sacrament and that people should only enter into those vows seriously. And so I think I've always thought that this show was wrong from the very start. I think it shows the way that society has come to understand marriage as something that is actually quite flippant, that is just a continuation of dating, almost as if it's a kind of accessory to a person's life. And we've seen this with things like the introduction of no-fault divorce that makes it easier for people to get divorced. I agree, again, with Laura, that marriage is the bedrock of a society, and if we have weak marriages, we have a weak society, and I think it's as simple as that. But I do want to say that in relation to this, as I mentioned in the introduction a moment ago, that even though this has now come out as being, you know, the show duped its audience, which is put a question mark above that anyway, whether it's right for them to have done that, because it implies almost that it's almost like it's trying to send the message to its audience that it's okay for people a man and a woman to get married to each other without the man knowing that that his bride is transgender, regardless of whether they informed him beforehand. You can easily imagine a situation where, after having taken the first steps in the process for the show, he was informed that the bride was a transgender woman, and then felt that he wasn't able to back out.
This is the important part. So we want to get to the meat and veg, which is the idea of, can you consent to marrying someone who is not...
You're disgusting. No, you know, Calvin, you can't consent
before we get to that, I do want to...
having sex with somebody without knowing.
I want to clarify that marriage is an indissoluble union between one man and one woman under the eyes of God. I want to get to that point first before we go to the trans bit, because you cannot consent to something that is not marriage if you don't know who the other person is. If you don't know if that person is a man or a woman, it won't be marriage.
Of course not. I mean, just to say they don't actually get legally married in the show.
But
in a way that's I don't think so. But in a way, that's also another layer of deception. Everything about this is deceptive. Now, there was a woman called Gail Newland several years ago who dated and had sex with a woman and pretended she was a man. So she apparently made the other woman wear blindfolds and used a prosthetic.
How is that not rape?
She got a custodial sentence.
Right.
You cannot pretend to be someone that you're not. It's fraudulent.
Yes.
So while they're now saying, but it wasn't the original PR behind the show, they're now saying, oh, the groom was forewarned. It's encouraging this idea of deception, and people need to be really careful about that because it's fraudulent. You have to be clear about who you're dating. It's basic honesty. And the idea that you can enter a marriage, even this kind of reality TV fake marriage, without knowing someone's sex, it's really disturbing.
I also find it interesting that a lot of people who would describe themselves as progressive talk a lot about rape culture, but don't recognise that Channel 4 promoting this message through the show by duping people. And if this hadn't come out later, they would probably never have said anything about it, never explained to the audience that he had, in fact, been informed in advance. That they make a song and dance about rape culture, but that they don't recognise that there's a very obvious issue of consent here. I mean, we've just heard this news about Russell Brand. That's also going to be on Channel 4 this evening. So it's a mystery to me that whoever makes the editorial decisions doesn't seem to see that this kind of thing is such a problem.
But it's all about ratings. And if you think about the reality TV stars who have sadly taken their lives after the trauma of not being prepared for being in the spotlight. I mean, you can't say suicide is one single cause, it's multifactorial. And yet we know there's a problem. We're talking about death by ratings. They really don't care. The people taking part in the show are exploited. Everybody watching is being exploited too. And the best way to beat this is simply don't watch.
No, I think that there's a bad vibe over at that channel, actually. You know, the last time I got stitched up on TV, it was on that channel. And in fact, after that, the last time I did a documentary, they clipped my answers from different questions and put them onto alternative questions to make it look like I was saying something I wasn't. That whole channel is a scam, which is why I'm taking everything they say with a pinch of salt around this Russell Brand situation, because I think it's so convenient that, you know, the guy has 6 million viewers on his channel, which is more than Channel 4 and The Times put together. It's really, really convenient that the establishment wants to take this man down. So I think innocent until proven guilty is very, very important in this case.
Well, it should always be that case. I mean, I haven't read the article, I haven't seen the programme, obviously. However, there aren't any charges. And we're talking about old cases. It seems so unfair to blacken somebody's name without...
Trial by media.
...charges. It's trial by mob, trial by media.
I'd just like to return quickly to Laura's point about the reality shows in general, these kinds of dating shows. I don't know if this is actually on Channel 4, but there is a show, I think it's called Naked Attraction, where they gradually reveal a person from the bottom up, and through that process they eliminate people, and then finally they meet each other naked at the end of the show, and it's on that basis that they decide whether or not they'll date.
So
and it really is, it's almost I don't know whether you could describe it as being almost blasphemous in relation to marriage and relationships. There's something that is really deeply subversive about this, focusing on people's physical appearance and treating marriage as if it isn't a vow, a very serious commitment, and as if it is just something that you flippantly enter into and you can get divorced later if you don't like the person.
Now, do you both know I had a Channel 4 documentary called 100 Vaginas? Yes, it involved some nudity. But it was a very, artistic documentary. It had a lot of integrity. All of the women who took part were treated with absolute care. But I've got to say, making it was a real balancing act. Because without naming any specific names or specific circumstances, there were times that I thought, I cried in the loo, or I thought I was going to be sick, to make sure that the programme stayed full of that integrity and care that I always envisaged for it. As soon as you are pitched in this battle for ratings, it's quite hard to keep the moral high ground and look after people.
I don't just think it's about ratings, I think it's editorialising our society. I think they want to... It's cultural subversion. They want to change the way we see family, the way we see marriage, the way we see all of these things.
But of course, the best way to respond to this is by getting married.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking this on the train on the way here, unrelated to this debate. I just noticed there were a lot of young couples on the train who were very visibly engaged, and I just thought that is the solution to this problem, is that you just have to take these things seriously and refuse to be dragged into this sort of fakery, editorialising, this, I'm not going to go so far as to say it's an attempt at social engineering, maybe you would, but I think they are putting to us a very specific culture that they think that we should adopt, and I think that the best way to respond is by saying no. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way.
Very, very sound. Thank you very much.